Okay, hello there. Uh, my last vlog I mentioned the common synastry oppositions involving the Mars and moons of both Trump and the United States and how they would reflect in the composite chart of Trump um, and the United States. And I'd like to focus on that for a moment. First, in the composite chart of the Moon-Mars opposition, which is right here, uh, it occurs on the midheaven and nadir angle. Okay. Right here. So, yeah, the Moon-Mars opposition occurs right there on the midheaven nadir angle, and it gives it extra prominence because it occurs on that angle. Now, Pluto, which is the planet of transformation through death, among other things, is in the first house, and it forms. Well, first of all, in the first house, it signifies that the country's political pact or marriage with Trump will indeed be one that will leave America transformed for better or worse. And with Pluto, the transition or metamorphosis involved, whenever it's involved, is usually involves some sort of pain. And with America coming up on its very first ever Pluto return a couple of years after the next presidential election, it seems appropriate to me that a constitutional crisis involving the nation's leadership and our polarity as an electorate and attitudes towards that leadership is right on schedule. What it says about Moon opposition Mars in the software that I consulted in a composite chart is it can be very explosive. It's an indication of anger and hostility breaking out, which can transform any kind of relationship into open warfare. Well, it's accurate so far. One certainty is that you will never have to worry about repressing your feelings when you ought to express them. The problem is to make the expression creative so that it can help the two of you grow, instead of just being a destructive outburst. When difficulties arise, you should try to keep calm for a little while and make some kind of rational sense out of what is happening. Uh, when people with this combination do blow up, it's all over. It's all over with quickly. People, in this case, it would be between Trump and the nation or the media, as they represent the moon in any chart. Also, I should point that out. In a chart like this, represents the public. Actually, in individual charts too, it's representative of the public. So here's the public, and I guess this is Trump. Mars is war. He's the high profile, and we're here at the base of the opposition. I mean, that's one way to interpret it. I mean, the composite chart itself, the whole thing, is symbolic of the relationship as a whole, not any individual party, Donald Trump or the United States. It's both together. Just to reemphasize that. But so there's lots of blowups, and there have been, and it won't abate anytime soon. They're brief, but they occur so often that quite a bit of damage occurs anyway. And again, very accurate. Um, what I also wanted to look at here um, is, if I can find it, is the return chart for the United States right before the 2016 election. I have that here. And looking at that, what sticks out to me, we have Cancer rising, which is, of course, the same as America's sun, July 4th, Cancer, with the sun and Mercury conjunct, and both conjunct the Cancer ascendant from the 12th house, however, which is a little different. You can conjunct an angle, or any house for that matter, but an angle, whether it be the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, or the 10th, from either the previous house or the following house. And in this case, it's coming from the 12th, which is the house of hidden enemies. The house of open enemies is the house directly opposite the first house, the 7th. But the house of hidden enemies, the enemies that are, well, as the name says, hidden from us, that we're not aware of, that are plotting against us. And it's also the house of self-undoing, which means that sometimes our hidden enemies are subconscious in ourselves. But in this case, we'll just apply it to, I'd apply it to the covert efforts of Putin's Russian agencies to subvert America's electoral process. And you can also see here the opposition, and this opposition has been going on for quite a bit, between Pluto and Capricorn, and the Sun and Mercury, and the Ascendant, and loosely Venus. But primarily, this is what I'm looking at is the focus. This is what was going on in the return chart of the United States shortly before, well, a few months before the election, and because it was in effect in November. So I found that kind of startling in what it shows. And I want to take a look at last year's return and see what that says. Let me see here. It's a little less intense. I mean, the subterfuge is over, but well, it's not actually over, but here we see the opposition is still going on, and it's still rather angular. It's not exactly on the angles, but you have the Sun here in opposition to Pluto, and an even closer opposition between Pluto and Mars, which if you know anything about these two planets in opposition, is not to be taken lightly here, between these two. And the Sun and the Moon, the two lights, are also in opposition. So, and then that, to amplify things, as Jupiter tends to do in a 10th square, it's actually amplifying both of these oppositions to some extent. So you have a nice T, what's called a T square there, because it forms a T. And looking at the last, well, this actually, our upcoming July 2018 solar return for the United States. I have that right. Make sure that's correct. Yes, has to be correct. Okay. This year, still in opposition. It's, as you can see, it's separating. Well, Pluto, the outer planets like Pluto and Neptune and Uranus tend to move very slowly and affect sometimes the same spot several times, because as you can see with the little R there, it's in retrograde during the return. These are precessed, by the way, the charts. So we have the opposition between them. But then there's also a trine between Jupiter, the Sun, and Neptune, which and a sextile here with the Moon. So I'm going to take that as a sign that things are going to work out a little bit better. Well, no, you still have the, well, this is called a Grand Cross. We have Mars, Mercury, squaring Jupiter. Well, actually, no, it's not exactly. But we do have some, again, we have some oppositions. And when you have crisscross like that with Jupiter and the Moon and Mars and Mercury, it's something of a grand cross, except that Mars and the Moon aren't an orb to form a square that would complete that. But it does square Uranus, which well, we'll call it one. But besides that, you have a grand trine with Saturn, Uranus, and Venus going on here in the first. I'll count that as the fifth, and the ninth houses going on, and the Sun and Jupiter, which is always good, between the 11th and the 8th houses, and the Sun and Neptune between the 8th and the 3rd house. Lots going on, but I'm thinking that compared to the 2016 and the 2017 charts, there's a lot less tension and a lot more promise, and maybe that means that the Department of Justice investigation into the collusion between the Trump administration and Russia will bear some fruit. I mean, it's already produced a few indictments, and I don't see that stopping this year. And maybe that is the it's a mixture. It's definitely a mixture. But I'm going to leave it there for now. And thank you for looking at the stars with me.